Good morning to my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club on my YouTube channel, a channel dedicated to spreading knowledge, wisdom and OPE being other people's experiences in the forms of book summaries and other journeys that we're able to learn from. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to deliver a summary of a book, a wonderful book from an awesome author named Robert Greene, an acclaimed author of a number of awesome books. One being the 48 Laws of Power. But today's book that I'm going to cover is entitled The Law of Human Nature. And it's a book that's going to look a little bit deeper into what makes us humans tick. And it's interesting to note that we share a common nature. Whilst we may be different in some areas, we're very similar in other areas. And what I'll do is I'll pick out 2 or 3 morsels, 2 or 3 gems, 2 or 3 fruits from this tree that Robert Greene has been able to help harvest for us and see where it takes us. So the first key message from this author, from this book, is where he talks about our rationality. And it's important to understand that humans are described as having a rational soul. We are the only animal in the animal kingdom, the only being in the universe that has a thing called a rational soul. Animals, whilst we love them and we can't live without them, don't have a rational soul. When an animal dies, its spirit, its soul dies as well. Whereas a human who's been created in the image of God, meaning that we have taken aspects of his virtues, have both a body and an intelligent soul, a rational soul. And this rational soul is a gift from God. God made the universe, God made the planets, he made the grasses, the animals, the mountains, the seas, all of those things through his word. So he made a command and these things came into being. But when it came to making man, when he came to making Adam, the first man, it was a different process. He handcrafted Adam by taking the clay, by taking the soil and forming a body, and then through the kiss of life he breathed a rational soul into Adam and brought him to life. So humans, people like you and I, have 2 key components to us. We've got the body, which is temporal, and we've got the soul, which is eternal. The soul, once created, once it comes into being at conception, will continue forever and ever. And we have this rational soul, this ability to think creatively and to act productively. But this rational aspect to us is unique and different from any other animal in the animal kingdom. or any other life form in the animal kingdom or in the universe. So what we have the ability to do is, whereas an animal uses instinct to determine its reactions and its actions, humans have the ability to do something in between the stimulus and the action, and that ability is to think. I remember going to a Steve Covey seminar at the Opera House, and he talked about this in great detail, where he says that the human being has the ability to think after a stimulus has occurred, and then to decide what action to take, determining what sort of future we're going to experience and to be rewarded with. Because each action has an equal and opposite reaction, and all of the things that we do has a first, second and third level consequence. And the beauty of being human is that we're able to contemplate, we're able to visualize, we're able to think about what those potential consequences may be, and that also shapes whether or not we follow through with a particular action, or we moderate or calibrate our actions to generate a different outcome. So the author here talks about the fact that we have rationality, which is the ability to counteract our emotional effects, to think instead of react. And it's important to understand this, that when you look at the human brain, there are authors, there are scientists, there are doctors who suggest that there are two aspects to our brain. We've got the primitive brain, which is our ability to fight, flight, or freeze, and that's our emotional part of our body, where we just react. It's our instinctive part of our being. And we've also got another aspect, which is the thinking brain, our ability to think rationally about what is going on and to decide our actions. The important thing to understand is we need to be able to manage that, because what the author says is that our ability to think as opposed to feel does not come naturally. It is a power that we need to cultivate, but by doing so we realise our greatest potential. We know lots of people in our lives who just react to whatever happens throughout the day, throughout their lives, without being able to moderate and calibrate those reactions. As Steve Covey says, the difference between reaction and response is our ability to think about what we're doing and to act in a way that is productive, that is purposeful, that is shaped by our experiences rather than inflamed and driven by our fears, our uncertainties and our doubts. So the first key point that comes from this book is where the author digs a little deeper into our rationality, and he talks about self-sabotage, and he talks about the fact that self-sabotage is the most common way we ruin our lives, and we need to fight against this self-sabotage by living life with a positive attitude and not taking all of the stimulus or stimuli that come into our lives as threats. Because we live in a different world today to what our ancestors would have lived thousands of years ago. We don't have saber-toothed tigers hunting us. We don't have people chasing us down to kill us and to steal our wives, our children, and our lifestyles. Fair enough, we are under threat all the time. It is a war, it is a battle, but it's a different type of world that we're in. It's more subtle these days, it's more indirect. The war is more indirect, and we need to be able to operate productively within the boundaries of this new world, and to live with a positive attitude and to live with positive expectancy, and not to be our own enemy, the person who's going to bring you down, the person who's going to cause yourself grief, the person who's going to cause the self-harm. We need to be, as I said, living in a positive and productive mental state, and have the right mindsets in order to leverage and make the most of the opportunities, the many opportunities that come our way, especially for us who live in a first world country like Australia. One of the examples that I love using is the example of the late Prince Philip, who, from my perspective, had a fantastic attitude, a great attitude. He lived a life of a prince later in life, but as a young boy, his life was anything but royal, anything but princely. His father wasn't the best father, and he had a very difficult upbringing, living alone and going from place to place. But in his life, what enabled him to get on with his life and to live the best life possible was that he forgave his father and just got on with life with no bitterness and with no complaining. Now, we are often surrounded by people who are just complainants. They just complain all the time about everything, and they are draining. They are absolutely painful to be around and to live with, because they are bitter. They are just the sort of people who just continue to express a bitterness for the things that have happened in their lives, rather than to embrace them, rather than to accept these things and to move on from those things, to know that those things, even though they were uncomfortable, even though they were painful, don't really define who we are, because at the end of the day, suffering is optional. Now, life is not going to be easy all the time. There are things that are happening, but these things can be viewed as lessons, things that you can take, you can learn from, and you can use to shape your future. Use them as stepping stones in order to get from where you are to where you want to get. And this is the sort of attitude that Prince Philip enjoyed. He enjoyed a growth mindset. He was able to take what had happened, those discomforts, but to not allow those discomforts to define his present or his future. He didn't live with bitterness. He didn't complain. He didn't have to explain. He just moved on and did the best he could with what he had at that point in time. So he just embraced his life, he embraced the lot in his life and engineered his calling. And interestingly enough, people with poor childhoods develop empathy and learn to forgive. They learn to let go of negative emotions and get on with life by taking responsibility and accountability and expecting nothing from others and simply building a life that expresses the love that they're able to generate. The second key point that comes from this author is that, interestingly enough, you don't normally read about this sort of stuff, but this author talks about the human nature, where he says that we all have both feminine and masculine traits. Not saying that we're male or female, but we've got masculine and feminine traits that are blended into our personhood, and we need to embrace and leverage both of them. I remember chatting with a girl that I used to work with who talked about male and female energy that we all have, which is aligned to what this author says, the male and female traits. And as the author says, you've got to embrace both of them. I remember doing karate many years ago, Goju-Ryu, and there is a concept within karate called hard and soft. Just like people, we have hard elements of our makeup and soft elements, and we need to use hard and soft together in order to achieve our desired outcomes. Now, we can't be hard all the time, and we can't be soft all the time, but we need to oscillate between either end of that spectrum. We need to be a pendulum that swings depending on the situation. We need to be solutions oriented, and we need to employ situational management. We need to do the right thing at the right time, and being hard at the wrong time is just as bad as being soft at the wrong time. So we need to learn, and in order to learn, we are going to make mistakes in our life, but we mustn't be too fixed in our outlook, I guess is one way of putting it, and to not repress and succumb to gender stereotypes, because at the end of the day, we are all different. Each and every person is designed differently from each other, and we're designed differently from each other for each other. We are meant to work and to combine and to dovetail into each other in different ways. Just like within a family, a husband and wife come together. They are very different in many ways, but those differences are designed to bring harmony, to bring equilibrium, to bring advantage that needs to be expressed and enjoyed, because as God said, Adam can't be on his own. He needs company, he needs a partner, just like everybody needs a partner in order to share life experiences and to live those shared experiences. We need to share our capabilities, our strengths, our weaknesses with others in order to bring meaning and purpose to the world. It's important to understand that we must not deny our biology, and to understand that men are very different from women in many ways, and this is through design. We're not all the same. men have differences, women have differences, and we need to appreciate and to acknowledge and to celebrate those differences. Just like Adam was different from Eve, Eve was created to complement Adam, and Adam to complement and supplement Eve. Those differences were intentional. And what the author here says is that science informs us that men are usually, not always, but usually better at focusing and hunting. Men love to separate the world into distinct categories and neatly file things away in our brains. Whereas women, on the other hand, are different in the fact that they are better at pattern focus. They are better at collecting things and collecting information and weaving it into a coherent web that connects. So there's a combination here between man and woman that is most powerful at the way it is able to process and see the world. So what we're saying here is that we need both male and female perspective. We need male and female energy in order to make the most of the world that we live in, and hence why it's important that men and women come together to form families, why children need a father and a mother in their lives in order to bring balance and to bring a balanced perspective to their lives. Because as we said, there is male energy, there's female energy. There's a male perspective, there's a female perspective. And when you yoke these two energies, when you yoke these two perspectives together, you get an infinitely larger, exponential, productive outcome than when you have the one energy just yoked to the other energy. So 1 + 1 can equal 20 or 30 or infinity, as opposed to 1 + 1 equaling 2. So it's important to celebrate our gender, to celebrate who we are, to celebrate our strengths, to acknowledge our weaknesses, and to work together to create a better outcome in the world. And the last point that the author comes across and talks about is where he talks about generational values that shape our lives without us realizing how big their impact is. Which means that each generation has a responsibility, because we're all a link, a very, very valuable and strong link in this long chain that goes back to day dot, to when humans were first created, and hopefully it's a chain or a link in a chain that will continue into perpetuity. And we all have a responsibility, because we are all ambassadors to our ancestors, and we're going to be an ancestor to somebody else. And we need to make sure that we are an ancestor that people want to be proud of, want to look back on and to thank and to appreciate. And to understand that it's the job of each person in their ancestral chain to be able to link the previous 3 generations to the next 3 generations. And back in the 14th century, this author here, Robert Greene, tells us about an Arab scholar, Ibn Khaldun, who was a sociologist, who talked about the generational values and the group dynamics which came by having different generations live, harmonise and work together, because it allowed tribalism. And he talked about the fact that there were 4 types of attitudes that were expressed and celebrated within this generational grouping. These generational group dynamics, which are key and important to helping groups grow, thrive and express themselves, and to to push themselves, to multiply themselves into perpetuity. He talked about the fact that there were attitudes, 4 different attitudes, one being the revolutionaries, the ones who instilled and brought change. He talked about the orderlies, who were the ones who brought organisation and structure to the new system. So the revolutionaries could be seen as the people who brought together the skeleton, and the orderlies were the ones who put the flesh, the muscles, the tendons onto that skeleton. The third group were the pragmatists, who were the ones who found ways and means of enjoying the new order that had been put together by the revolutionaries and the orderlies. And then came the skeptics, the ones who were the next follow-on generation, who questioned the pragmatists, who questioned the orderlies, who questioned the revolutionaries, and who questioned their parents' lives of leisure. Because what happens is that with every change, each generation adds to it and then comes to a point where they start subtracting from it, where they live too much a life of leisure, and the children question what their parents are doing and what value they're creating. I remember reading a story just recently about the middle class women in Indonesia who were questioning their parents' expression of Islam and their faith, and how they'd relaxed a lot of the laws and a lot of the cultural elements, the traditions, and they found it that they were uncomfortable. So that the educated Muslim girls who were coming through, who studied their faith, saw that there was a gap between what their parents were doing and what the faith was expressing, and they became more traditionalist. They'd be wearing the hijab, whereas their parents weren't wearing the hijab, just so that they could take on their parents, just like all children do, just being different. And sometimes being different is doing less than what their parents have done, or sometimes being different means doing more than what their parents have done. I remember my mother, my late mother, God bless her, who told me when I was growing up, she says, "Son, we send you to the best school. We pay lots of money for you to get educated so that you can be a better Christian than what we are, so that you can understand and express your culture, your faith, and be the best example, the best current example of your ancestral linkages, and to be somebody who's going to be the best ancestor for somebody else who follows." Anyway, on that point, I think I'll leave it there, but I think you'll agree that this book from this author, Robert Greene, The Laws of Human Nature, is a fantastic book. And every book that I've ever read is a source of knowledge. I get to learn something new, and there are times where I could read through a whole book and just underline one sentence, but that one sentence joined a number of dots and helped me understand my life and the life around me a lot better. So wishing you all the best on this Wednesday, this hump day. Looking forward to coming to you again from a different place with a different message of empowerment, where we live, learn and pass it on, and we can take from the different authors who have sat down, who have delved into their soul with deep thinking and expressed what they are feeling, what they have learnt during their lifetimes, because each generation has its challenges, each generation has its lessons, and it's important to understand that we can't live 1,000 lives, we can't live 1,000 years, but we can learn from those who have come before us through their experiences, through OPE, and to understand and to appreciate the patterns that they're able to offer us, and to know that these patterns are recurring throughout the ages and will come again. Just like life is a cycle, we will have to deal with the issues that our parents, grandparents and forefathers have had to deal with at a different time. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it does repeat itself over and over again, and it's important for each and every one of us to make the most of the lessons that we have been handed. Anyway, take care everybody, yasas, and bye for now.